Hello, everyone. Today I'm with the lovely Keeley Taverner, who's a psychotherapist, and I just wanted to have a quick chat with her about her job and what that can bring to family clients as well. So, hello, Keeley.
Hey Vicky, good to see you again. We had a wonderful video talking about divorcing a narcissist.
We did.
It's done really well on YouTube. And, I refer my clients who come to me seeking help for relationships with narcissists, and most acutely when an individual is divorcing someone who they believe to be narcissistic, and the divorce process is particularly difficult for them. So I want to thank you for our interview. As as for me, I'm a passionate psychotherapist who specializes in helping empathic people dealing with narcissistic individuals, helping them to understand the dynamics. Because often what happens is people end up stuck researching narcissism, trying to work out why did they treat me this way? What might I be able to do to make things easier? And often taking disproportionate responsibility. So my role is to help people to understand the dynamics, but also to understand choice, consequence, and impersonal empowerment, taking back
What's
their power.
what made you get into? I mean, it's a particular specialism, isn't it? The empath
Mhm.
and the narcissism work that you do.
Mm.
What made you get into that, Keeley, in the first place?
My own relationships.
Ah,
Absolutely. I had children young, and found myself in a really difficult predicament once I was pregnant and became vulnerable.
gosh.
And so that was incredibly perplexing. And that's where I picked up my first self-help book.
Ah.
So, yep, I was watching Oprah one day. She's controversial at the moment. And just began to read, and the notion throughout the book was personal responsibility,
Okay.
which was quite a revolution for me because I'd felt, and it's not that I wasn't a victim, because there were things that were victimizing, but also beginning to kind of look within, look at the choices I was making that actually fueled my sadness, my my miserable state, really. And that really just massively inspired me to reflect on my life, reflect on where I was going. I was a young mother, was more or less single, and just wanting better for us. And so that led me to go back to education, do a degree. And then I got my first job working in prisons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then dealing with personality disordered offenders,
Mm.
high risk offenders, beginning to understand personality disorders, psychopathy, narcissism, and that just opened up my world. But yeah, personally, I was still having these one-way relationships, thinking, I'm the good girl, sometimes being attracted to a bad boy. You have to be,
Mm.
real about that.
Yeah.
And I guess I was bright enough to begin to work on myself, and then realizing, actually, I don't want to become a psychologist like my colleagues. I didn't want to become a forensic psychologist.
I,
Actually, I wanted to help people like myself who weren't at the further end of the mental health spectrum,
mm.
but who found themselves in difficult, intimate relationships where they often gave and didn't understand why perpetually they ended up, just like I did, in these one-way relationships. So it became like fused
Mm.
between growing myself and then thinking, actually, yeah, when I qualified as a psychotherapist, thinking, well, firstly, having to understand, developing a private practice and what
Yes.
that meant.
Yeah.
And then I just thought, well, I'm just going to specialize in what my pain's been,
Mm. Mm.
because I know it. I'm obviously much further along than my clients would be. And so it just became this really beautiful marriage.
I was going to say, it sounds as though your focus and your drive is to empower people actually, to kind of to give them back a little bit of control and to feel like they can make decisions. And I think that's where lawyers and psychotherapists and divorce coaches and things like that can really work hand in hand, because it is, as you called it, this marriage, isn't it? To try and give a client back their lives, I guess.
Absolutely. And something I did for myself.
Yes. Yeah.
So at the time I was, unskilled. I was working on the checkouts at IKEA.
Wow.
And then, realizing that all the energy I was putting into this relationship, if I could take a smidgen of that back to develop myself,
Yes.
actually, it empowered me. It gave me choice. It gave me different career options.
Yes.
And that was, just particularly profound for me. That was exactly, it was the way to heal, and then, to get to this privileged position to help other people go in similar situations.
I mean, it's difficult as a lawyer. I see clients quite a lot, and it's lovely sometimes to watch their journey, and see how they change and develop and start taking choices for themselves. But obviously, there are some people that I'm not skilled in any way to be able to deal with. What is a psychotherapist, Keeley?
So a psychotherapist, we've trained for 4 years, usually at a master's level.
Okay.
And you choose the specialism. So in terms of human psychology, you choose what aspect of psychology really fits for you. So person-centered psychotherapy really spoke to me.
Okay.
I chose not to do CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what often my coaches and mentors were encouraging me to do, because, well, then it's clearer for you to get a job, Keeley. The pathway is much clearer.
Yeah. CBT is a very big thing, isn't it, at the moment? Everybody's kind of, go for CBT, that will really help.
Absolutely. And I was really fascinated by a much more holistic view of the individual, not just thinking and behavior, but also, social status, diet, class, race, the politics of the time, the history, what time you're born. I was much more interested in the individual as a whole. And that person-centered psychotherapy really spoke to me. But I also knew it was a risk, because the way forward in terms of my career post-qualification was not clear, which is why working for myself became the natural progression, which is not what I signed up for. I just wanted a job to rock into. But, by God's grace, I had the courage, the support, and the mentorship to really encourage me to, start small. So I was a probation officer. So I was really equipped dealing with difficult personalities. So then it was a slow shift from going down to 4 days at work, 1 day private practice, and then building up. I qualified in 2012, and by 2015, I took a 5-year sabbatical. So,
right, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, because I suppose as a probation officer, very strict, you're working within the criminal justice system, and now you've got all this freedom to be able to work with a client and do what works for them. So I suppose you've got a lot more freedom, haven't you?
Absolutely, but you have far more responsibility.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's not that guaranteed paycheck. So you have to be much more innovative and thinking about how can I help people much more broadly, which is why I create a program. I have a program called Navigate Narcissism Now, where I'm bringing people together more rather than just one-to-one.
One-to-ones, okay. Talk me through a typical journey of a client who's started on separation and maybe has received a referral to you from a solicitor or from somebody else, a friend or whatever. Talk me through their journey so that people can have an idea as to what it looks like. I know it's different in every case, but kind of a sort of typical journey.
So usually, sometimes people will find me on TikTok or YouTube and then inbox me, or like a friend might say to somebody, I think you need to talk to someone. So as I'm well established now, there's much more referrals through word of mouth.
Yeah.
And then we just have an initial 15-minute talk. and I'll get to understand what's the biggest dilemma for people.
Okay.
And often the dynamics become really clear, even within just that 15-minute talk. And I can work out, well, let's move to a consultation.
Yeah.
We have an hour together. I'll explore your situation. For example, if someone's separating and how that's beginning to play out. So for some people, they've never spoken to a professional before.
Mm.
Some people have been told a whole raft of fibs. So they're not quite clear on what their rights are, how to navigate forward. They're kind of often quite isolated and doing the best that they can. A lot of clients who refer have read every book, watched every YouTube. They're very familiar. But in terms of how it really begins to marinate into their own life and how their own histories, the way that they were parented, their regard for themselves, often that can be the missing link.
Mm.
And that's where I help people to understand how their own personal histories has shaped them. So many, like I said, majority of the clients I work with would score as being highly agreeable, thinking about personality traits, avoid conflict, very giving. And so beginning to marry how attachment, how we were raised, whether our parents were kind or not so kind, did we get our basic needs met? So people begin to understand how their current dilemma is fed by their history. And then also, knowing my own limitations. So then potentially in the case of divorce, might be referring to a mediation lawyer, a mediator, a lawyer like yourself, or other agencies that can help people to navigate a space that they don't understand and may well have often been told untruths. And when you caveat that with also cultural dynamics for people from different parts of the globe, being hypersensitive to culture, race, class, and most importantly, power, because it's not always wise to, speak your truth, helping people to learn how to keep themselves safe, but also to take active steps to, empower themselves. Just like, for example, it might be, getting a HR1 form done, not necessarily realizing that, you do have rights. And just because you've been told that I can sell the house and you won't get anything, not necessarily true. So it's unique to every person I come across, but there are most definitely a lot of patterns that emerge. One being people really being in the dark.
I mean, do people find it? I mean, I've often heard about therapy, but it's a really difficult experience, and that clients often take kind of a step back. Is that the case with you, Keeley? How do clients find it?
Well, I think
difficult.
I think just as you mentioned at the beginning, this kind of coach therapy option, I think people view coaching as where I am, where I want to be. And think that they don't have to, focus on aspects, especially if you've had a very traumatic childhood past. So coaching can often be the aspects that's referred, people prefer that.
Future focused, rather than let's hide the things from the past.
Absolutely. However, your past is in your unconscious. It's in your beliefs.
It forms the way you behave, isn't it?
There you go. So one of the things that shows up why people might refer back to me will be when self-sabotage begins to emerge and they'll be really frustrated with themselves. And that is where, my training in helping people to unpick, which, as I said to people, look, you may want to avoid aspects of your history, but it's actually in your present because it shows up in your beliefs and your behavior. So what you think you're avoiding, it's actually sabotaging you. And so, I'm also really trauma informed as a psychotherapist, and helping people to understand their nervous system, involuntary reactions, making links with health dilemmas, be it high blood pressure, IBS, which is frequently shows up with clients who avoid feelings, try and sweep things under the rug. So this becomes a much more holistic way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? I've done work with somebody who's a functional medic. And so she does a lot about gut health and things like that. And she was saying just how much stress can cause the microbes in your stomach to stop working, and then you end up with all sorts of health issues, and those emotional issues really can physically affect you, can't they?
And yeah, and people are at the doctors wanting diagnoses,
Mm.
having tests, sometimes operations.
Mm.
Actually, it's a psychosomatic issue.
Yeah.
And that is, it's a real beautiful way to help people to understand involuntary reactions, why they may have bowel movements at times when they're feeling uncertain or need to go, to the lavatory. and so that they begin to understand their nervous system. And I think combining that with psychoeducation, as well as beginning to dip into inner child wounds, actually, I think what I often find is people become much more curious about themselves. And once they face it, I'm pretty good at putting people at ease. And I'm not your stereotypical therapist either, so it's not this on the couch and I'm sitting there writing notes. I think
You've
that
got the glasses, Keeley. Come on.
And I often put my hand on my chin. I think there's something about, let's have a conversation. Let's see what's going on for you. Just going to be curious. So, though that can also be particularly helpful. And for some people, they don't want to go there. Some people are asking me for strategy and tips and skills. So it really is unique.
So it's very client driven, client driven. So, I mean, on average, sort of how many sessions can you say? Is it sort of a really long piece of work? Is it? I know with CBT, it's very much kind of going in very short term and kind of coming out. What about your work?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say there are political reasons behind the drive for CBT.
Yes, of course.
Regarded to be much more cost effective. Often people have come to me after they've had CBT and they're baffled why their coping strategies are no longer, working, which is often, well, if you're learning to cope, you need to get to the core issue.
Yeah.
So generally I request clients commit to 6 months.
Okay.
So that they have time for the insights to filter, because what we want is that integration between not just knowledge, but it begins to filter into your behavior, your belief systems, what you're also doing to get out of your comfort zone. So many people, self-care is regarded as being selfish. So if you've ever given, actually giving back to yourself can be very, very difficult.
As well as a parent, I'm a mother of two. They're getting older now, but as a parent, you put the children first, don't you? You always put the children first, and there's almost that pecking order of kids first, and you kind of, I think the dog's actually first in our house now, but it was the children first at the time. It's probably now the dog, and the children are very vocal about that. The dog always comes first. The dog always comes first. But then as a parent, you're almost hardwired to not think about yourself and not to look after yourself. And I think it is something that you really need to sort of take time to actually engender. And the other thing I was going to say is change requires energy. And when people are going through a really difficult time, they haven't got the energy. So it really is getting the building blocks, isn't it? And so in that sense, it's a really tough process that people have to commit to. But I think you're living proof of the fact that people can do it and their life will be better as a result.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you said, change takes energy. Stuckness takes energy. You see, so the challenge is you're not going to navigate either way.
Yeah.
Number one, purposeful, conscious change. Well, as a psychic, I have no idea of what you may become.
Yeah.
When you begin to honor yourself, to the tap dancing lessons you may have been denied as a child, if your parents only wanted you to do academia. So that holds immense untapped potential. Whereas if we stay stuck,
Mm.
well, you can slowly start to make predictions about what will happen to someone, and that's quite easy to do. So it's about choice, empowerment, but also being really delicate about how someone's personal unique circumstance
Yeah.
impacts on them. So I'm a big fan of discernment,
Mm.
that we begin to choose much more wisely, and a massive fan of starting small. So one of the things I'm passionate about is acknowledging our victories, because
Yes.
the big picture can seem so elusive.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what have you managed to do today?
Yeah.
Ringing that victory bell.
Being kind to yourself. I always say that to my clients, acknowledge the little things, because actually
Okay.
from acorns oak trees grow is one of my favorite expressions, and it's something I probably use every day. And most of my clients, if they're watching this, will probably go, oh God, here she goes again. But there we go.
I say to my clients, we want to ring that victory bell.
Ah, fantastic.
And that might even be having a meal. Some of my
Yeah.
mum, they'll eat what the kids don't eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, actually, what about having your own meal with the
Yeah.
children?
Yeah.
Small wins that we wouldn't
Yeah.
even notice, and that builds momentum.
Yes.
Plus,
Yeah.
having a community of like-minded people
Yeah.
who get it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, Keeley. I was going to ask a question, but I think actually it's probably a bit trite now. But if there was one piece of advice that you could give somebody going through the separation divorce journey, what would it be?
Get professional help.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot of hearsay, a lot of have you done this? Have you?
Yeah.
And I know, it can be challenging, the finances, find a way. I believe we are a creative species.
Mm.
There's usually a way. There's usually a way. Get the advice, and then seek professional help. Get informed so you have clarity about the way forward, and then day by day.
Lovely. Thanks ever so much, Keeley. We will be putting your details in our links, so people can get in touch with you if they need to. But it's been lovely to talk to you again, and fascinating as usual.
All right, you take care of yourself, Vicky. Keep doing your brave work.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.